Sup everyone, this is Karak with ACG and welcome to the wide world of another episode of Walking the Walk, this time for The Division for Xbox One, PS4, and PC. So what is this video? Well, it's an artistic and game design, musical sound, and theory discussion. It's not a purely technical analysis. Will I talk about graphics? Yes. Will I spend hours dissecting textures, resolutions? Nope. For folks waiting for episode 2 of the Mass Effect 2 Walking the Walk, my save games did die, so that'll take a bit more. As always, if you like this kind of video, maybe subscribe, maybe don't. It's a free world. Let's jump in. Now, as you guys know, for these videos, I like to do my best to get the HUD elements off. I've done my best here, but there's still a few more. That's sort of the way The Division is. Now, I've taken one of my characters and gone back to the starting, and that's sort of where we'll begin this part of the game. Let's walk through the entry here. There's so many things that I think are really impressive about The Division when it comes to the graphics and to the world design. So we're going to talk a little bit first just about how they went about creating the world. Now, as a lot of people know, Massive made this title, and they sort of had just a couple days to come forward and design an idea to show their executives, and they decided that instead of showing them something digital, they would make a diorama, and that's what they ended up doing, and that's what basically sold this game to the higher-up executives, was a diorama, which is basically a physical representation. It's like miniatures for a board game, and they created this, and they showed it to the executives, and it basically showed an overview of this destroyed area with a sniper looking out of a window and all this kind of crazy stuff, and that started it all. When it comes to the way Ubisoft does things, I think it's always good to remember just how often they're open to sending people around the world. One of the things that they did for this game is they decided, you know what, we need to send some people out and see what New York's like. So we get this idea of this team that went out, they took pictures, they talked to people on the street, they send their entire design team out, something that they did in Watch Dogs if you watched my Walking the Walk for Watch Dogs. So I love this part right here, just the overview of security. You get this idea, and of course a lot of this is cribbed from Watch Dogs, but this idea of security, and I'll show it to you later in the video, but there's actually places where you can see the camera systems are using the electricity of light poles and other stuff. Now, of course, this is like your wall of mourning, almost like 9/11, and I find it interesting that a lot of people were angry at Massive. They had talked to him about the game design, and they were like, hey, did you talk to 9/11 survivors and stuff like that? And it was strange, but basically Massive said no, they hadn't, and a lot of journalists were all upset by this, but you know what? You don't need to put 9/11 into every Michael Bay movie and every video game, and they wanted to do a different, slightly altered present and past for their title, and I applaud them for that. It was a worldwide event. It did affect the world. It did just happen in New York, and I think that at times you don't need to put that into every single bit of fiction that ever happens in New York. So personally, I'm fine with that. Now, as you guys remember in Witcher 3, one of the things I talked about is that ability to look behind you in the snow and see your footprints. It's something that really works to solidify your presence within the game world. It's a very small thing, but everything that we do that can impact us and show our presence in the game world, it helps solidify that reflection of life. And I swear, in Division, it might be resource intensive, and it might check to see if it has the resources, and then sometimes draws your footprints and other times doesn't, because I swear I've seen it happen. Now here, of course, we see that dark, gray, nasty kind of snow, and I love the fact that they really understand, and they've made sure to sort of incorporate the fact that you see the winter wonderland, but next to it you also see that nastiness where snow starts to melt and get mixed in with dirt and other particulate and pollution. Let's just go ahead and listen here for 1 second. I have to say, sound design wise, I know some people have some issues with the guns, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but frankly, when it comes to the worldview, that layering of sounds that we just had there are great. Everything from birds to the dog to the sound changes that happen when a sound effect goes over water, which I'll discuss in a little while. So we just saw the pupil dilation effect that happens when you enter into a dark area from a lit area. It's funny how many games still don't do that, but this is something that The Division does really well, and we see it a lot. We're going to see a lot of interplay of light and graphical choices that sort of reflect a realism that I think is missing in some other games that have come out, even recently. Now, as I stated, we know that Massive sent people to New York. I like the fact that you get this differing look to different characters. We'll see it even more with the civilians, but every place looks lived in regardless. They did a really good job of making, you know, I mean, I know that the game was already going to look junky and dirty, a little bit like Fallout, but I think they did a really good job of eliciting just a tiny bit of a feeling of reflection of life, where things look like even the debris on the ground, where you can sort of tell, and the way people are sitting and what they're doing. No one is really at attention here. It's almost like there's this tired feel. I think they did a good job mixing the animation with the static graphics that they've got going on. So come back out here. Now I saw a glitch when I came up to this, and I want to see it. So that looks fairly bad. There's a lot of the parts of the Division that shock me in some of the weirdness, but watch this. Burr, 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 burr. So for some reason their pathing is messed up, and I don't know how that ever got past beta, but their pathing is messed up and they walk right over that guy. We're going to start seeing some of the dynamic weather effects as well, which I think are spectacular and also a little bit messy in the Division. It's going to be interesting to go ahead and discuss this. But once again, talking about static and the animations, everything you see here is, you know, we're supposed to be in this feeling that this is a current situation and not a post-apocalyptic one. And I know Massive was shooting for that, but I think that they sort of overshot and they got a little bit more post-apocalyptic. They continually talk about how it's this feeling of continuation, and you're supposed to understand that you're actually in the event itself, but I'm not 100% bought off on that. I even mentioned it in my review. It feels far more post-apocalyptic than it does mid-apocalypse, even though you see things like this where everything's just sort of parked where it can be. Go over here to this, the tent here. I'm really not surprised, I guess, but I'm really impressed by the amount of detail they have in all of these locations. Just everything from these post-it notes to this map. There's so much there's so much here that gives you a feeling of a place that's being worked in, and even something like that where the banner is wrapped around the side and just sort of left there. There's this almost detritus of activity that's happened where if you can feel the world itself is just tired, and I think they did such a spectacular job at that. Unfortunately, they did such a good job that in many ways it's tired. It feels so tired that it feels, like I said, post-apocalyptic. Now, I want to show you guys something, and this is not me nitpicking the game. First, I want to show you guys what I think is awesome, which is that this is not only not a flat texture, but it's actually a rippled texture. It's got some depth to it. I think that that's great. Whoops, I went behind the wall there. I think this is really cool because in a lot of games, this would just be a flat texture, but they've warbled it. They've added some depth to it to make it look like that plastic, that fake window in a plastic, almost like tents sometimes used to have. So as I said, this is the starting location. I've ran my character back. We're going to go through here. We're going to look at one more thing, and then we're going to check out the weather. I love the floor rippling. Look at that, where the moisture has made the change, because normally that would be flat, made the change, and that's sort of all rippled up. You also see how moisture affects things like posters. I'll try to get to a subway where you can see what happens when air conditioners and dehumidifiers go down, and what happens to things on walls and stuff. There's an incredible attention to detail there. This all looks really cool, just this cluttered feel, almost like a hurried, cluttered feel. Like, just throw these over here. You can get that feeling, that state of emergency that they were going for. So, again, this may be nitpicking to some people, but I didn't like the fact that the weather is now completely different. This is something that does not happen that much in the Division, but I'm going to run back and I'm going to show you. I'm not 100% sure why it does it here. And maybe it's because they want to deliver a very particular feel at the starting, but as you'll notice, it is completely different. So I'm not 100% sure why that happens. Within the game world itself, it rarely happens. I've felt that, weather, aside from, I would say, jumping into the actual dark zone does look a little different. But here, boom, completely different. Now, one thing, though, about the Division I think that really elicits a feeling of atmosphere is the weather. First of all, we know that the snow is actual real ice particulates sort of pre-calculated via the game's graphic engine, so it can basically build up on your shoulders, and they've even said that if a person stands in place long enough, they'll look a little bit like a snowman, and then that will end up melting, wetting your clothes when you're inside, and then will dry off if you stay in warm areas. So that's very cool. The weather systems are very, very important. And for example, if this was all a sunny area and you saw these bodies and you see these body bags, it would look a particular way. But the fact that they have snow on them, like they've been left out, right? Like people don't have time. At some point, the dead pretty much the first thing we lose respect for in the middle of an emergency. You know, people say, oh, we lose respect for the living. We do, but the dead are the first. They're always the first. And whether they just end up getting burned or they end up getting left like this, at some point, they are the first thing to be ignored. And I love that feeling. It's the first thing you see in the game, and I think that that's on purpose. It's that feeling that you are now entering this area where that respect for the dead just isn't allowed anymore. There isn't time. And if you have any history in your background, if you've read any history, if you study history and stuff like that, you'll find out that in major areas of catastrophes, major areas where there are issues with, let's say, sickness and stuff like that, you'll have it. Now, if you see a little bit of a graphic warble, I'm not 100% sure why the Elgato is doing that, and I apologize. It usually fixes itself after a moment. There we go. Sorry about that. Sometimes writing really high bit rate to the SSD drive, that just happens with the Elgato. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, continuing on that path, again, I love this feeling. I think it's completely on purpose, and it does such a great job of solidifying this. Also, walking through the skeleton of this creation right here, of this tent that's fallen apart. And you can see, of course, the light, the volumetric lighting in this game is really well done with it piercing that fog and sort of giving you that feeling that maybe this is a location of respite. And light, colored lighting, all of that kind of thematic lighting is actually used to a very high degree in The Division, where it's trying to indicate safety or trying to indicate particular groups. You'll see that with the cleaners. You're going to see it in multiple places here where light is used to inform the gamer, even if it is subconsciously or definitely not as in your face as you may expect. There's something so great about this location. Walking in, now you're technically within the world proper, and it looks terrible. It just looks so dreary. I think it's unique that I come from an area where there's been a major volcanic eruption, which was St. Helens in the 70s, I believe. And being able to talk to people and play the game with people who lived here during that time and who are old enough to remember that volcanic eruption and how quite similar this looks to that. It's actually one of the things that more people than I was expecting had mentioned when they have been anywhere near a place of volcanic eruption. And it's probably because of that gray feel. Here, let me close the door for you. Talking to the people at Massive and finding out that this really all just started from them wanting to do something like a Tom Clancy and also online persistent. How it all sort of came together reminds me that, you know, Ubisoft as a developer just does, or as a publisher, just does things in an odd way where they go and get game ideas and they just let people sort of bring those to somewhat of a fruition, and then they decide to move forward. In many ways, it reminds me of Primal and Blood Dragon, because you find out that how those games were built, they weren't just, oh, we want a DLC. It's that multiple groups were sort of giving out ideas of what DLC they wanted to do, and certain ideas sort of clicked off the checkboxes that somebody wanted. And especially when you find out about how Primal was created and how they had wanted to do some type of really far past kind of title and nothing had really fit, and then somebody showed them what they'd been working on and they were like, hey, you know what, let's do Primal. And I like that. I like the way that these guys, this particular publisher, sort of goes out and gets ideas, and I like the fact that they're not afraid to spend a good amount of money to get some authenticity there. For example, it's interesting to note that the weapons and the issues that they had trying to get real weapon sounds. So much of the working team is in Sweden, which has insane gun laws. So they sent people to North Carolina, which basically gives babies guns with their birth certificates. And they went out about creating assets while they were there. Now, this is once again sort of how this publisher does it. It sends people to the places that have good physical aspects of whatever they're looking for. And it was interesting to find out that Massive not only just shot a bunch of guns, but they actually fired at hundreds of different surfaces so they could collect data on sound, but also things like velocity and travel through materials and ricochet, and I'll cover those if I ever actually get in a battle. The different layers of frost effect that's actually real. You have it there where the water's collected in the crack, sort of goes to that, and then on the left here where there's not enough and it's sort of dried out. Such a cool attention to detail. So one thing that a lot of people mention is, man, there are a lot of cops and there are a lot of maintenance vehicles in the Division that are damaged or destroyed. It is interesting to find out on one of the blog posts of the people that went to New York with the publisher and basically went and took pictures and talked to people in New York, that they themselves were astonished at how much maintenance is required by a major city. Now, this is a major American city. It may be different in other cities, but it was a ton of maintenance was required within the city to keep it running. And so that's why you see so many maintenance vehicles. What do we got here? Oh, just little fours. Okay. Let's just listen.
I'll give you that.
I'm going to grab this little device and listen to it, and then we'll discuss guns for a second.
What do you honestly think you'll achieve with it?
The lockdown is a necessary precaution to control the situation. We have enough to handle as it is.
But what are you doing to let people pass through? Most people just want to leave the city to meet with their family.
We will reevaluate the relocation plan at some point, but for now, the lockdown holds. Now, miss, I've got work to do here. You really should stop looking for trouble and make sure your own family is safe.
I am rarely as impressed with the effects in a game engine as I think I was here with this one. Now, I know some people have issues with the gun samples, so ignoring that for a moment, because that can actually, whenever you go and sample a gun and move it over, you can have issues where you apply sound effects incorrectly. But there are a great deal of really cool effects going on here that are processing within the gun samples, like transmission. Now, transmission is basically a sound wave changing properties as it passes through materials. So, and that transmission then incurs other things like I've talked about in the past, like reverb and occlusion and reflection. And we get all that. When you could hear those guns, you could actually hear that reverb coming off the wall right beside me, but you could also hear echo because that long sound wave basically becomes two sounds to the human ear when it has that chance to spread like that. I think that's great. Let's just listen here. Now, to a nerd like myself, that is awesome. You could actually hear that sound basically coming up through the tunnel in front of us, bouncing off the different materials and changing. For example, that refraction that actually happens when a sound wave passes through medium that is different than what it was passing through prior. And we see that here with multiple different mediums. And you can actually hear that wave from the dog barking sounding completely different than what you would expect if you were right near it, because the wave is altered as it gets to you. And of course, in some of these more open areas, those effects are far less pronounced, and as they should be. I'm just really impressed by all of the different effects that they've got going. Everything from refraction, reflection, reverb, echo, it's all there. And for somebody like myself who really enjoys hearing that, really enjoys a good surround sound system, it helps solidify that atmosphere a lot. I just find it sad so many times that so many developers don't understand that many video game fans spend incredible amount of money on their audio systems, and so little attention is usually paid to them. And here we have a situation where they paid a bunch of attention to it, and you notice it. It pays off. It was interesting. One gamer said that they were wondering how this world is where all of these cars don't work, but everybody's got, digital watches and guns. I think a lot of that stuff is explained within the game's fiction if you read, if you understand the game itself, but it can seem a little bit odd that you see all of these vehicles. And I will say this, as I've discussed prior, this is supposed to be a situation that's occurring now, and I get that, but you do have some oddness there where you have some vehicles that have crashed and there's still smoke coming out of them, and you wonder how long that smoke has been coming out of them. There's little issues here and there where it's difficult to sometimes tell just how long ago the event happened. And I think one place where Massive sort of had a misstep is helping us identify that time span between the event and between you getting here. They've tried to do it in the cutscene, but it never really plays out as well graphically. Sorry, just checking here. Now we're going to see some civilians. Civilian AI is handled pretty well. What's that guy doing up on the car hood? Civilian AI, I think, is handled pretty well. Whoa, he just disappeared. I've noticed quite a few glitches today, and I fell through the ground and had to come back. So that kind of stuff definitely does happen. So continuing on, one of the things that's really interesting to me is how well they did the interiors for some of these locations to give you that 3D effect. In The Division, many locations are places you can enter, which, number one, my hat's off to them, because I think that really does help so much with the atmosphere. And like a location like this where a lot of these places, when you look in a window, it looks like you could possibly go in, even though you can't. You can go into some places, but it looks like you can go in. It does such a good job of making you feel like these places aren't typical flat storefronts. And I had mentioned this in my Walking the Walk for LA Noire. Just looking at the resolution on the textures, fairly good resolution on textures in some places. They had to take their shortcuts where they could, but when I was first playing this game, I loved this location here with these lights. It's like, let's waste a bunch of electricity on these Christmas lights. And here's a moment right here where they do a good job, but there's a little bit of a time lapse here. You can't quite figure out when this happened. Like, you're looking at it, you're going, okay, this guy's dead. When did this happen? It does a good job of eliciting an emotional state, which is what they're trying to do, which is where, oh man, shit can go wrong. Because this is, remember, that's not a normal guy. That's like a city defender. That's somebody who's out there trying to make sure the city continues to work. It's a maintenance worker or something like that. It's not just somebody who starved to death who wasn't prepared. And I like that, but at the same time, it just feels a little bit odd because it's difficult to tell. Like, how long's he been laying there? Did he just lay down? There's a saying, and it was a saying that Massive actually... Oh, wait. Let's... I'll get to sayings later. Let's take this guy out. God, I don't like this gun. Ooh, what's going on? Sorry, I switched... So I'm walking around with the joystick and the gamepad, and I switched to the mouse, and I'm not using a mouse pad. I'm doing it on my thigh here. I should have just used the gamepad. So one of the things I wanted to mention is there is a saying that the Romans had, and people butchered it later. But basically the saying is that every nation... every basically large civilization is only 3 meals away from anarchy. And we've seen this misused and misquoted multiple times after that, pretty much just like any quote that comes, you know, centuries prior. But that's sort of what Massive was trying to get with this, and that's the problem I think that can occur as well when you're playing the title, is because you're not quite sure, are you 3 days into anarchy, or three meals past? Are you 9 meals past? Are you 12? Are people eating each other? And you find some of this stuff out as you go on later. But when you first enter, if you're a person who is thinking about picking up the Division, at times, if you're somebody like me who cares about the atmosphere, this is a loot game, but I love atmosphere in titles, then it can make it a little bit confusing. This is such a great scene, such a great location. And this poor guy slipping and just walking, I mean, just looking nasty and messed up. It's like, his kidney falling out. I really like the civilians in the game and how the game goes about sort of putting them together using various parts so that you do get some copies. Don't get me wrong, you definitely do. But as a title, as a whole, they look pretty good. Good reflections everywhere. There are some places where the reflections don't really meet and don't really reflect what's next to them, but in a lot of places they do, and surprisingly so. There's some shortcuts made. Once again, we have that 3D location that makes you feel like you can go there. Sorry, I'm losing some frame rate. Not quite sure why. All right. Let's go over here. Yeah, that right there. That's such a great look. Just that feeling that depth is a little bit more than what you're seeing, and it can be fake. That's how a good game is made, is there's a lot of fakery. In fact, let's talk a little bit about fakery. One of the things that we notice a lot of in the Division is a thing called, well, it depends on what entertainment medium you're using, but in many mediums it's called blocking. In games, it's usually called, I would say, funneling or boxing, but basically what happens is, depending on northeast, south, or west, the direction you come to a location, they've done a very good job of funneling the gamer, just using various subtle little places where they put down different, architecture and stuff like that, that causes the world to feel larger. What do I mean by that? Well, you normally never enter a location, northeast, south, or west, that doesn't have some kind of obstruction or block or funnel. Now, if you look even here to the right, you can see where those concrete ballasts are basically slightly tighter as you get into the intersection, where on the other side, there isn't those at all. There's two vehicles that sort of funnel you to the left. That's done so that it creates a feeling of a larger location. I love this fiction right here. Like, why did these guys do this? Oh, there's bad guys right there. Yeah. Okay. It's like 2 parking attendants went wrong right here and just shoved these cars up into the corner. The Division, if there's anything it has going for it, absolutely, it is the sense at times of mystery, to where you do see these things, and it may misstep in some places, but you see something like that, and your brain is just like, what? Why did they do that? So back a little bit to, like I said, to blocking, boxing, whatever you want to call it. So you'll see this it throughout all of the Division, this feeling of whatever direction you're traveling, everything looks just dramatically different. And let's say you get a game, even a game like GTA or a game like other Rockstar games like LA Noire, where if you're coming from the north or the south, a world and a location can feel somewhat the same. Here, because of what they wanted to show you, which is this world that's destroyed, they sort of used that as a start-off point. Oh, I got some military pants. And they basically expanded on it by doing that funneling and changing things so that you always feel like every place is unique. And it's great because you truly can come from the left or come from the right, depending on different game moments, and almost forget where you are because it's so different. Now, I talked about temporary security measures prior at the starting of this video, and here's one of these locations where you basically have a temporary camera system plugged into the local lighting system to sort of start watching what people are doing. And I love this. Is actually a real thing that they can erect, that FEMA can erect. Of course, it's not FEMA in this game, but I like that feeling because it gives you that, it just sort of gives you that emotional resonance for the location, and that a true disaster did happen here, and they need to check and they need to watch. Whoa, what the hell is that? Okay, so what am I hearing?
You mind pointing that somewhere else?
Yeah, one thing I don't like is the civilians will react to you like you're always trying to aim at them. What in... I've heard this sound before, but I don't know. Oh, I see. It's a guy taking pictures. Okay, so I've heard that sound in the past and quite simply just ran past it all these times, and this just one time I got to see what that is. So, wind patterns, let's discuss that for a second because, of course, that's super interesting. But no, seriously, for a second, we will discuss it. One of the reasons why I'm so stoked that they took a lot of the technology from Watch Dogs and put it into this game is because you get to see wind patterns. You get to see wind and snow blowing off like concrete ballasts. Here, these to the right, you'll see little tufts of snow, and they actually blow accurately with everything else in the game. Very well done. Now, coming to debris and smoke and cinders, one of the things that the game does really well is it alerts you to whatever turf you're entering, whatever location you're entering, by doing specific things. For example, if you're entering an area where there are cleaners, you're going to start seeing things that are on fire. The game does that here even. When you enter this place where this management system is, this replacement of FEMA, you see their stuff more and more. And I think that does a good job of making you feel like these are real locations, even, of course, if those guys are dead. Once again, you have a little bit of that mystery. It's particularly well done in The Division and how it draws you forward continually. This is such an epic looking location. In fact, a bit like Gears of War with the older style, just the architecture, that older gothic gray concrete architecture. And it's cool that this is where your base is. So you'll also notice, of course, more civilians in locations where the JTF is, which I think is awesome. It's just that reflection, just a little bit of a reflection of life. So she was checking this guy. Again, a little bit of a mystery here. How long was he there? And there's some questions there. I really do wish they would have done a better job reflecting just how long it was after the event in some of these, because a lot of them don't match up, where you see something that appears to have happened a long time ago, but then, it wasn't a long time ago when all this started. Oh, so here's something I wanted to point out to you guys. These these are cargo drops, and the straps have been left on, and it is a very actual, real military tactic in some places where if they're dropping supplies in areas where the situation is flexible and they may not have that forward operating base for very long, they'll leave those straps on so they can pick it up right away. And I think that's sort of cool. They're not just there, right? They're there, but their straps are still there to indicate that, like, number one, they were dropped off quick, but number two, this is indicating to you that the JTF's location is not completely secure. Once again, here we have this really cool temporary, camera situation here, looking over this entire area. There's no bad guys here. Thought I heard a bad guy. Nope. And it's plugged in to the light pole, and I think that's cool. It just shows you that temporary, and it's sort of messy, right? It sort of gives you that messy feeling of like, hey, we just had a couple moments, so we're using these temporary, camera measures, and we're loading it up. So I wanted to move us forward a little bit, so I stopped recording until I could get up to this location. I love the change in colored lighting here. It's very cool. It's also getting just a little bit darker. Everything's just changing. Let's jump over this truck here. I actually am very impressed with the animations, by the way. The animations, though there is some clipping and some collision. Oh, wait a minute. Let's listen to this battle.
Let's party.
So I gotta say, having no HUD does make moving from cover to cover just a tiny bit more difficult. I never even thought about that. So one thing that just absolutely blows my mind is those first shots, you could actually hear the sound wave propagate through the area and bounce off the cars and pick up the different materials. And that is just insane. If you have a good sound system or a good set of earphones, you'll easily be able to hear that. As well as, I don't know if you guys heard, but there was a ricochet where you could hear it hit the original material and then hit the secondary material. I'm going to take this guy out. Those guys are a ways away, but... yeah, and this is more open. You can hear the sound. Whoa, that guy's... what's going on there? Speedy Gonzalez. That was weird. I think I'll switch. Your face is gone. Oh, yeah, see, I came out of... I've been playing with no HUD for a while, but I'm not as accustomed to this as I was in some of the other games I've done no HUD, like Primal. There we go. I'm also really impressed with the lighting on the fire. Look at that. I love the little effect where it's basically... yes, that is a camera effect, by the way. It's not a real effect where it shows that halo around the camera. That's actually not something that happens around the human eye, but whatever. Yeah, just really excellent sound for the gun battles. I get that people, like I said, aren't big fans of the samples. One thing that we do know is that they went to Carolina, they took all of those samples from real guns, but again, when you're translating it into a video game, sometimes you have to adjust them to make sure that they're, you know, not muddy and that they're not overlapping one another, and maybe by doing that, they've sort of messed up a couple and sort of taken the low end out of a few. I'm pretty happy with them overall. I didn't really see any huge issues. I'm pretty okay with them. I was interested to find out that Massive's way of handling the particle systems is a little different. Well, not the particle systems themselves, but snow and debris and dirt and cinders. Those are particle systems that actually allow for them to accumulate on items. So if you have like dirty smoke billowing next to something, it will stain the texture next to it dynamically, which I thought was really just not something I guess I was accustomed to. It's not something I've seen repeated in a lot of games. I'm hearing... is that a drone? No, it's not a drone, but it might be above me. It's weird with no HUD. Oh, whoa, there's a bad guy there. Let me take these guys out.
You won't last.
I should probably explain to people what the difference is between a reverb and an echo. A reverb is when the sound effect travels so quickly and bounces back to the listener that the effect itself seems longer than it should be. It seems elongated. While an echo is hearing it twice.
Great. I'll be back in like 20 minutes. Then I'll talk you through plucking and gutting. I'm not doing that. If you want to meet dinner, you are.
Plucking and gutting.
It's the least I can do after you forced me to learn friggin' CSS. You need to get some rubber gloves and your least shitty kitchen knife. Oh, and some scissors for the wings. If I puke, it's on you. Like literally.
I'm okay with the voices. A lot of people have complained about them. I'm totally fine with them. I don't see an issue at all. The lighting engine here once again shows just how many dynamic lights you can have. Also, a little Easter egg for people. If you've watched I Am Legend, I'm not quite sure if people understand, but near one of the mannequin stores, there is actual mannequin out, the one that tricked Will Smith and I Am Legend to walking up to it and getting caught. It's actually in the game, which I thought was cool. There's a lot of little, I guess, just little hints here and there of movies and stuff. Okay. Of course, again, you see now we're not only seeing snow, you're seeing cinders come off of the different fires that they've started. These, of course, being the cleaners. So let's see if we can find them up here. Take this one out. Just going to be very careful here. It is different, definitely playing with no HUD. I like it, though. I'll continue playing this way, for sure. A little more difficult finding things, but look at that lighting. Such a great job. That is so amazing. The radiosity around that light effect right there is just perfect. I mean, even here where you can see the light bleeding over the top of the trash truck. Now, for a second, I'm just going to walk, and I want you guys to sort of see all the different lighting effects going on right in this area, including the absence of it.
The dark zone's walled off, and with good reason. It's where the infection hit hardest, to the point where no one, not us, not LMB, not anyone, could hold it. Now it's a no man's land, full of people willing to take their chances with the virus to get away from the factions in the streets. And what happens behind those walls, well, very little of it is good.
Yeah, the different lighting effects here are amazing. You can actually see the mending of the different color changes, the reflection of the fire, but also this white halogen light. Such a great job. And also, it's cool that this is one of the first places where the removal of light sort of symbolizes a more dangerous location, and that's done obviously on purpose. Now, since we're in the cleaners area, I think it's cool to sort of talk a little bit about how characters were created so that they could be put into the game and feel real. One of the things about the factions, and you can see this on the main site for the game, they talk about this, is some of the questions they ask themselves is the faction plausible? And, is the faction appealing? Is it cool and fun? Well, one of the things we notice about the cleaners is the fact that they make no sound. And I think that's one of the things that works so well, is in a world, in a game where I talk about sound design so well, people need to always understand that the absence of something is as important and as powerful as its inclusion. And that's always something you need to keep an eye on. Then they also ask, like, does the faction allow for a variety of gameplay mechanics? Well, for example, the cleaners, of course, you have fire and stuff like that. Is the faction a direct threat to the division? And then does the faction fit the theme and tone of the game? And I think with the cleaners, more so than anybody else, this all works. This is such a great location. Just, they did such a good job. And also, one of the... okay. Here we go again. Just all you hear is that sound of their fire throwers. Just, and them dying. You just hear that sound of that flame, and that's it. I snuck up on them. Like, I didn't even realize they were there. You always got to watch out with these guys. 2, 3, depends on what type of groups they go in. But they're somewhat easy, but they can be hard. So what I was talking about earlier is you notice in locations like this, whenever dehumidifiers turn off or ACs turn off, whenever airflow is stopped, basically what happens is multiple things are affected, especially soft materials like glue. And you see this in locations where, let's say, there's been a flood and paintings will ripple and posters will ripple, glue will come undone. And I love the fact that they've basically identified that and made sure that it's reflected within the game world. And the Division has issues sometimes with VSync. I'm not quite sure, and I'm noticing that right now as I'm playing. I don't know if it's the 980 itself or some setting in the drivers, but I apologize. It seems to come and go. Just super interesting location, though it does remind me a little bit of War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise, where everybody was basically exploded and dried out and all that was left was their clothes. Sometimes it looks a little odd, where it looks like everybody just sort of went and all their clothes blew off of their bodies, but... sorry about that. Had to move forward. Couldn't stand that, whatever was going on. Just seems to happen in the subway tunnel. Doesn't happen anywhere else. There's definitely an issue with the actual graphics card itself. I don't know if my 980 is dying or what. It's funny because the lady, when she was giving you the walkthrough, she's like, and people go to the dark zone to escape the danger of the gangs. Well, guess what? The dark zone's 85 times worse. I'll probably cut this video short and do the dark zone in a separate video with my other character, my maxed out one, because this guy, he'd end up getting smoked quite simply and quite easily. Now here, of course, we're coming up on contaminated zones, and you see slight color shifts to green. Such a great idea. It's just, I mean, you wouldn't even, if somebody doesn't point it out, sometimes you wouldn't even notice. It's just so subconscious. Green equaling corruption and mildew. It's so easily done. So before entering the subway, and even in the subway a little bit, I was talking a bit about the cleaners and just how each group that was in the game was identified via those particular questions, so that, Massive could decide if they fit and if they continued to sort of further the gameplay. And I think that that's great, because sometimes you'll get a game where mobs and just the different groups together, they don't really feel as if there's any synergy there. Sometimes they feel as if it just doesn't really make sense. In fact, there are some issues I do have with the Division. For example, the shield guys that sprint straight towards you that are sometimes with the cleaners, that can seem a little bit funny, because you're just like, why are these two together and why is this guy sprinting straight towards me? So we'll finish up here, moving forward just a little bit, and a little bit more of a dark zone. Such a great job with the 3D effects here. The different color of the green on the right. They do a good job of making you remember that New York isn't just all buildings. You know, there are some parks and there is some green there. And even here, covered in white and covered in snow. I just like that sort of difference. What did I hear?
Don't scare me like that again, okay?
So that's something you'll notice in the Division. A lot of times they will purposely put just different audio cues behind walls to make you sort of feel like people are talking inside buildings. Very well done. Though we're not hearing it a lot now, one of the things that really interested me when I first started playing this title was the dynamic music that they used, with a lot of callbacks to like John Carpenter, who made The Thing, The Fog, and a couple other 1,000 scary movies. And it's funny how well synth and snow go together as elements. I'm not even quite sure why. I would love to talk to somebody who understands music theory and find out why those two work together. The use of those long drawn out pieces and more of a wail when you think about it, just a long series of long slow tones versus quick multi-notes. Like if you listen.
Bliss is putting a lot of effort into this.
All you get is a single synth and then over the top of it, just an incredibly easy element to play. It's not super complex, but then when you get into battle, what happens is those mend into the battle tune itself, and they all sort of carry the same elements, and it can give that feeling of solidarity between the traveling and the actual drawn-out battle. Heading into a safe house here. You know, the safe houses, I'm just going to be honest, they consistently impress me. Each one feels unique from the one prior. And they did a good job of just separating their identity. So they're not 100% different, but overall, like this one here is just overarching levels on top of levels in sort of a high-rise building. And, oh, I had to move forward there. And that's much different than the first place you go to, which is far closer to the action of the original event itself happening and has a different feel, the JTF main base. It's very cool.
Running smooth around here. But now half my boys are dead. Vic joined up with those cleaner jackoffs, and things are out of control. You gotta step in, cause right now, I got nothing.
The constant reminders of Christmas, you know, Christmas is terrible for a lot of people, regardless of where you are, whether you be poor, you don't celebrate Christmas, whatever you do celebrate, you can't enjoy some festival that you want to do at a particular time that's in the winter, let's say. And they did a good job of sort of solidifying just how terrible this place is. I mean, you see like a Christmas tree in one area, but then over in a different location, you see like bodies next to the Christmas trees. And it does a cool job. I mean, it does a cool job of sort of separating the festivity of Christmas and this horrible thing that actually happened. So we're in a safe place now, so I think I'll cut part 1 down short. And then in part 2, what we will do is cover some of the dark zone and just some of the more tangible aspects of game design that they have sort of done. I've already mentioned multiple different aspects of game design, but sort of how I think Massive and just Division itself have sort of collected all of these thoughts into one area. And, you know, I did rate this as a wait for a sale. I didn't rate it as a buy. And I know a lot of people have an issue with that. But here I am doing this video. It doesn't mean I don't really enjoy the game. It just means that I think there's some technical issues, which we've even seen some today, that hold me back from being able to tell people, hey, you should go and get it right now. So anyway, I hope you guys like this video. I will do part 2, unless my save games get destroyed, which they probably can't because this is actually on a server, but I will be doing part 2 soon. We'll do some Dark Zone, maybe just walk around some more, discuss some more of the tangible aspects here of game design. Let me get my map up and running. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, thumbs up. If you didn't, thumbs down. See you on the next one. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Peace out.